This episode, drilling concrete, it's not as imposing as you think. Well, I was on a job, Larry, was on a job that required some concrete drilling the other day. And I thought about it for a minute and I'm thinking, this used to really intimidate me. So I decided that we would do a show on drilling concrete.
Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros.
Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition's entitled, Drilling Concrete, It's Not as Imposing as You Think. And to help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, Johnny.
I'm imposed.
Yeah, well, you. So, folks, I have to tell you, so it's a long story, but one day Johnny calls me up. He says, do you have one of those concrete drills? I said, sure do. He says, I've got 50 holes to drill. I said, you ever done it? He goes, nope. I'm like, oh, well, this will be fun. And so, anyway.
It turned out to be easy, but we'll talk about that.
Well, and that's the whole point, is it's actually not really as difficult as most people think. And our goal here with this show is just basically to kind of tell you a little bit about it, how it works, and how to make it as simple as drilling through wood, right? So, which is pretty simple for the most part.
By the way, it's hot as hell outside.
You noticed that?
And that's why I'm wearing a T-shirt. So any of you in the audience that are watching us on YouTube, and I've got a T-shirt on, suck it up, because it's hot. Because it's hot.
Yeah, summer is here, as they say.
Yeah.
It is, it is the quote dog days of summer, as they say. And here, living in the greater Atlanta area, or Hot Atlanta, as they call it, it's been a hot one.
I'll tell you what, it's hot everywhere right now.
It is.
I mean, it's not so bad here. There's some places that are really over the top. Anyway,
be that as it may. Johnny, how much concrete drilling experience do you have besides the 50 holes that you drilled? Have you ever done it?
No, I've done it. No, I've done it. I've done it before. Why I asked for that special drill that you'll describe in a second is because this was on a pool deck, which the concrete there is pretty hard.
Yep.
And they were, I want to say they were 1/2-inch holes or bigger.
Yeah, I think they were.
They had special
holes.
fasteners that they wanted to put in.
Yep.
So I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen any other way without a special tool.
Yeah, this is a true statement. And even as folks, if you know this, if you're drilling large holes, even in wood, you need a bigger drill. Just bottom line, you need a 1/2 horsepower drill or more. And sometimes the limitations in drilling are more your hand strength than they are anything else, because that drill will turn you right around if you're not careful. Anyway, be that way. Johnny, what are the reasons that we would actually want to drill concrete?
Oh, well, there's a lot of reasons. You want to attach something to concrete.
Yeah, the biggest reason that I always thought was just attaching something to concrete. And unlike wood, concrete does have a couple of unique characteristics, and one of them is it's basically liquid rock, right? So it's really, really hard. There's a couple of different ways to add to attach to concrete. One is to use what's called a tap-con, which is actually like a threaded, a self-tapping drill. It's not self-tapping, you have to drill a hole, but it'll tap into the concrete and hold. They're really good for, I consider them very lightweight attachments to concrete. The best ones to me are anchors, and an anchor basically is you put a bolt in a sleeve down into the hole, and then it has a flared fitting at the bottom, not fitting, but the bottom of the bolt is flared out. And as you draw up on it, it expands out the metal and actually wedges itself into the concrete. Super strong, especially and it all depends on how deep you go into the concrete, but the deeper you go into the concrete, the stronger and stronger it is. And when I say strong, I'm talking in the thousands of pounds of tensile strength. You'll break the metal before you break the concrete out. And so anyway, so that's some of the reasons. I mean, some of the other reasons might be you want to run piping or some kind of electrical through a piece of concrete, or I don't know. I'm sure there's other reasons, but those are the big reasons that I've done it.
It kind of fascinates me. I mean, as far as anything can be fascinating, sometimes is that, you see some of these guys that are drilling through foundations with those great big, the great big drills that they have to set up and shoot them into the floor.
Right.
Have you ever seen those? Right.
Yep.
And they're using diamond cutters to
Yep.
cut a 2-inch hole through
Yep.
the foundation wall. And I'm
Yep.
not talking about just blocks. I'm talking about actual concrete.
Right.
And boy, that's really an art right there. Those, that whole thing. You just don't take a hand drill and do that.
Yeah. So when we talk about drilling through, that's a good point, John, because you brought up something that's kind of important. When we talk about drilling concrete, we're talking about maybe up to an inch size hole. Really, once you get past that, you need what John's talking about. You need a diamond bladed bit, or it's not a bit, it's a hole saw. And to go through that, you need something bigger. And that's usually really something you should just hire a professional for, because the equipment alone, those diamond bits, those 2-inch diamond bits. Have you ever looked at one, Johnny?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They're like $150 for the bit. Yeah. Then you need the drill that'll actually drive the thing, and that's a whole. I don't even know.
It reminds you. It reminds you of the movies when the guys are cracking into the banks, into the vaults.
Yeah.
That they shoot this thing as a footer into the base concrete, and then start to crank the drill in, you know.
Yeah.
Because you're just not going to put your body weight against it,
no.
and then have it done. So, I think from a perspective of either you're a homeowner out there or you're a handyman, if you have to run a new waste pipe or whatever out somebody's basement, you might want to think about hiring that out unless you've got that equipment.
Unless you've got that eequipment, because yes, it's very, very specialized and very, it's actually, the equipment's very expensive.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah.
So, but back
to the main topic that we
back to the main topic of drilling. Like, I've drilled holes that are 7/8 for sure, because I have a 7/8 inch bit. I know that, and I know I could go to about an inch. I might be able to go a little bit. I don't think I could get the bit actually. Part of the reason is folks, just to let you know, as you go up in these bit sizes, the cost of these bad boys goes through the roof. I mean, they get expensive, and mostly because they're either hardened carbide or they're diamond tipped bits, because you're drilling a very hard substance. So, and the bigger the drill bit, even in wood, if you think about it, a big wood bit is really expensive. So comparatively really expensive. It's the bigger the bit, the more expensive it gets. So anyway, be that as it may. All right, so those are really the reasons to drill through concrete that I'm aware of. And folks, if you have something, please send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com, and we'll, if there's other reasons, because we're trying to do this. I think the biggest thing that I've found, John, and I think you'll agree with this, is that you need the right pieces of equipment to do this. You're not going to drill concrete or anything really hard, including tile or brick or cinder blocks, which they're softer than concrete, but they're still hard things. You're not really going to drill them effectively with a traditional drill. You need a hammer. You need at least a hammer drill. And what a hammer drill does is it actually activates and it actually pops that drill bit in and out in a very slight way. And they come in various different sizes. I actually have a hammer drill that's a cordless hammer drill. It's a small. I use it mostly for tile, brick, and like cinder blocks if I'm putting small things, a little bit softer stuff. Its strike is not very strong, meaning the amount of pressure it puts on each knock is not very hard.
Yeah,
and these things,
I'll just pause you there, because if you're drilling through tile and you start doing that, you can really chip up tile, right?
Yes, very much so.
There's a little, and that's a whole other thing about when you're drilling through tile. But anyways, go ahead, Larry.
Quick little tip on drilling tile: use blue tape over the front before you start drilling.
And we have discussed this in the past, and we'll probably bring it up again. But
And I would tell you, if you're drilling through for example, a polished concrete floor, and depending on what you're mounting over it, if you can see it, you will always get a little bit of chipping around the hole.
Yeah, to me, it's always.
And also it depends. Well, I kind of get into the actual process of drilling, but there's just some little tips and tricks that you need to be aware of when you go and start to think about drilling through concrete. Because like anything, there's things that can happen that are unintended, which is not a whole lot of fun. Anyway, you need a hammer drill. Hammer drills come in various different sizes, as I said. Some of them are small, like basically hand drill size, and then some are two-handed. I call them, they're kind of monsters, and they're usually called an SDS drill. And that actually denotes the bit that they use. It's how the bit mounts. And there's SDS and SDS plus, and we won't get into the details and differences in those, but an SDS drill actually has a much longer stroke as far as vertical knock and a lot more power behind it. And they also handle the bigger drill bits. Now, it doesn't mean you need to go buy one. You can rent these at almost any rental yard, and it's relatively reasonable. Those are the two biggies, and some of these are pretty monstrous. I mean, they're like horsepower, like a full horsepower. So they're heavy. I'm not gonna lie, they're heavy. The one I bought one, I ended up just buying one from Harbor Freight, and because I got a good deal on it, and I actually had, at the time I bought it, I had a lot of holes to drill, and subsequently we've used it many, many, many times after that. But be that as it say, if you don't think you have a lot of use for one past your initial project, go rent them. They're relatively reasonable to rent. Coming up, almost every manufacturer has a brand or not. I did want to talk a lot about bits, because the two different types of bits are really important. The smaller hammer drills just use a traditional drill bit type bit. Most of them, the tips, if you look at them, have two sides, or they're straight across the face of the bit. They're usually angled. And I call those the two-sided bits. You see them a lot for drilling like tile and stuff. They're basically a straight line across the face of the bit at an angle. And they look more like an auger kind of like almost chisel faced. But there are also 4-bit ones where they actually cross. It's the same thing, but they cross. And those are great for concrete. The brand I use, they're called Bulldogs. I can't remember who the manufacturer is, but they call it a Bulldog bit. And they're, especially as you go to bigger holes, I definitely recommend getting the 4 headed bits, because it just speeds that process up tremendously. And John, I think when you took my drill, you used that 4-bit. You know how easy it was.
Yeah, I was quite surprised how fast that thing went through that concrete.
Yeah,
I drilled all those holes, and it didn't take me very long. I wasn't, if I remember right.
It took you about as long as it would take to drill 50 holes in wood, right? Maybe a little bit longer.
Just a little bit longer. It was incredibly fast. I mean, I was surprised. Let me put it that way, because when I was growing up, we had just a big what do we call that thing? A star drill.
Yep.
Remember those things? And it was a manual thing where you'd hit it with a hammer.
Hit it with a hammer. Yep.
And you turn it a little bit, hit it with a hammer, hit it with and that's how you would drill through concrete back then.
And that's essentially what these hammer
and that's what this thing
do.
is, except it's doing it a lot faster.
Yeah. And without all that manual effort,
Right.
And to your point, if you've ever used those, you called it a star bit. It's because they're crossed.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's a crossing. It's not just 2 blades.
Yeah.
And those, boy, that's the bit. If you can, they are. I'm not going to lie, they're more expensive. But if time is important to you, don't waste your time not using them, is what I'm going to say. So, that's that. It's funny. I forgot about that. Back in the day when they used to holes, they used to drill through.
I still have one. I think I still have one in my toolbox, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now they're still out there. I mean, you can still get them if you ever want to drill through concrete by hand. No thanks. Boy. But anyway, be that as it may, old technology, right? So the idea is the same. It's just been modernized. That's the key, is making sure you get a decent hammer drill and the right bits. And then it becomes just like doing wood. Now, some of those tips, same thing. If you're working on a polished floor, well, first off, let's go back to drilling anything. You do want to have an idea of what's underneath the surface that you're drilling, right? So in concrete, just like in wood, don't just go punching holes, because you could be punching through electrical or plumbing or anything, right? I mean, anything. And the other consideration is, do have an idea of how thick you think the slab might be. So the significance of that is just, if it's a 2-inch slab, I'll back it up. You need to have an idea of how thick it is, because you need to know if it's going to crack. And you really don't want to crack the concrete if you can help it, right?
Yeah, of all the holes that I've drilled in concrete, one thing I haven't run into is rebar.
Ah, yes. And then there is rebar in it. And rebar is another reason that I have hit rebar with those four-headed bits. Brother, it grinds them right up. Grinds it up. And you hit it with a two-bladed bit and it catches. You can feel it. And you're like, ugh, I'm on rebar or on metal wire, whatever.
Right.
If it's reinforced concrete.
Right. Or whatever buried underneath there.
Or whatever's buried, buried in the wire, The Lucky Strikes from 1952.
Yeah, Vinny.
Vinny, hey.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, just, have an understanding. How do you tell if there's anything underneath that concrete? Well, like electrical's pretty simple. Find the power box, find out where the box is outside, and basically draw a straight line. You're pretty safe if you do that, right? Seems like common sense. Well, that's generally things run in a straight line. Same thing with plumbing. If you're looking for the big lines usually, or the supply side lines, well, same thing. Look for the water meter box and where it comes into the house. And if you happen to be in that line, you might want to be really careful. If you're way outside those lines, you're probably not going to have any issues. It is important, again, to know how thick it is. If you're drilling through really thin concrete, say 2 inches or something like that, which I don't know why anybody would pour it that thin, but I've seen it. I can't say I haven't seen it. You do have to be careful. It works by striking. So the striking causes vibration and you can crack the slab if you're not careful. Now, on a 3 or 4 inch slab, especially if it's reinforced, that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. But it's only if it's really, really thin will you have a potential problem. It's different if you're drilling through things like bricks or cinder blocks to a lesser degree. Tiles for sure. If you're drilling through tiles, you'll crack tiles if you're not careful. And usually it's a result of putting too much down pressure. So remember, let the tool do its work too. Let it do the striking. Let it do it. It takes little tiny amounts. And some of these these holes do take a while because at the end of the day there's a lot of hard material there. Understand that it's not like wood where more pressure doesn't make it better. In fact, actually most of the time it makes it worse. So, back off on your pressure, and clean the holes. I will say this too, clean the holes out pretty regularly. If you're drilling a deep hole, pull the drill bit out and bring out the pile of dust, and you'll see this pile of dust that comes out. Surfaces, if you've got a really fine surface and you don't have anything that's going to cover it, meaning if you're putting an anchor in and you're going to put a steel plate over the top of it, you'll cover up any chips. But just like tile, take a piece of tape and put it over and start your hole, through the tape. It'll stop a lot of that chipping around the edges. It's not perfect, but it's certainly very helpful. One of the other good tips about the same thing with using tape is it does give you a good place to start the drill bit. It keeps the drill bit from walking.
Walking around. That's what I do all the time.
Yep.
Oh, those are great. That's great to, a lot of times people, they come up against, folks will come up against concrete and say, man,
I don't know what to do.
I don't know what to do. I mean, how am I going to get through that? Whether it's concrete, let's expand it just a little bit, brick. There's a lot of times outside, you want to mount something on your, whatever you got, on brick. It's the same thing.
Same thing.
It's almost, impossible. It just seems to me, I take a regular concrete drill bit and put it on a regular drill. Boy, it's
hard. It's hard.
It's hard to get through. I mean, it's just, it's tedious. You got to have some type of a hammer drill for that.
The minute you go to, so we use the Ryobi cordless tools, right? Well, I bought a cordless Ryobi hammer drill, and when I'm drilling brick, that's my tool of choice. It'll knock a hole right through it. It really works well. And I have tried what you're talking about, John. You'll sit there for hours. In fact, that's actually the story behind buying the hammer drill was I was drilling through I had a bunch of holes to drill in brick, and I'm sitting there, and after about 20 minutes a hole, I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And,
exactly. That's a good point right there. Because folks, if you haven't done this before, you're going to feel the same way Larry is right there.
Oh yeah.
There's got to be a better way because guys aren't. It's like, wait a minute, people would never be able to make any money doing what I'm doing right now, spending 3 days trying to get through one hole. And I remember when we built that pizza oven and we put that slab on it, you used that even went through that concrete.
It'll go through concrete. It's just
small for small
holes. It's fine.
Yeah.
For bigger holes, it's you need to kind of step up. But and it still takes a while with concrete. I'm not going to lie. But if you've only got 1 or 2 holes, it's not a big deal, right? But it's when you get into doing volume, or you get into those half-inch or 3/8 holes. You get the bigger holes, it's not quite so good. It's just not enough oomph is all it is.
Right.
But I think that drill. I think when I bought it, I was going to say it was $150. I think maybe it might not have even been that much. Works with the number of holes I had. I was like, oh, that's 2 hours worth of savings at 20 minutes a hole. And I can't remember, 40 holes or something to drill. I was like, all right, I'm running to Home Depot. And that's what I did. I went down.
Yeah.
And then less than an hour later, I was done. So even including my trip to Home Depot, I cost accounted it. Even my trip going to Home Depot, once I got back, I was done. I was done before I would have been done using the regular hammer or the regular drill. So yeah, and for bricks, it works great on bricks. Cinder blocks is another one. Cinder blocks are concrete, but they're a little bit softer.
Yeah.
And again, if you're only drilling small holes, you can use a traditional, a small hammer drill. It'll work really, really well.
We've really talked about, the 2 different types of tools themselves.
Right.
A hammer drill, and then what's known as the SDS drill,
which is a hammer drill. It's just a bigger,
which is a big one, and they have different chucks on them.
Right.
So just be aware, folks, that these exist out there. If you just have one job to do, you probably can rent a big SDS at one of the big box stores.
Yes.
If you had to do that.
Yep.
For you handymen out there that might do this a lot, they're not that, I don't know, Larry, I'm using your money here, but I don't think it was that expensive in the long run for what it was. I mean, there's no way I could have ever got through those size holes and 50 of them and got my happy butt out of there during a week.
They range in price. I mean, they're just depending on what you go, but you're going to spend at least $200 for a decent one. But if your time is worth anything at all, I will tell you this too, as a handyman, this is just kind of one of the additions to a handyman. It has opened up some job opportunities for me. Like I'm sort of surprised, just like you, Johnny, every once in a while you get a customer, hey, can you, John had a pool deck. I actually mounted some rails for
I was just going to say, this is, going down a big concrete stoop.
Yep.
And you want to put iron railing on it. This is the only way to do it.
Yep.
Okay. You're going to have to drill into that, and you're going to have to put,
big anchors in. Yep. Big anchors in. Yep. And, 3/8 or half-inch anchors. Right. And that's exactly, I've done that several times now. I was in a commercial customer. Actually, this job that I was talking about was actually one of my commercial customers. And I built one of those locking cages, John, for equipment, so I put that and I drilled those into the concrete, and mounted the uprights, and it was really good. I mean, it was game on, right? I would not have been able to do it had I not had the tool. Right. So that's, if you're a handyman, think about it. It's a nice addition to the retinue, if you want to call it.
Right. And it's a good point. As a handyman, you might be able to pick up additional jobs that you've turned down in the past.
Yep.
But I've turned down those jobs. Okay. Cause number one, I wasn't going to, there wasn't that many of them.
Right.
So it was like, okay. But they do come along. And, so, for you guys out there that are in this business, it opens up a lot of possibilities for you.
Yeah, it really does. So Johnny, this is a question. So I was talking to Allie the other day in the truck. She asked me a question. She said, when the spaceships land over at Johnny's house and they want to drill holes in concrete, don't they just fire up the lasers?
I don't know. I was hammered. Larry, you got some weird guests inside that truck.
There's what can I say?
Let me see. I got a card for a psychiatrist.
All right, folks.
All right,
with
my
that,
man. All right.
I'm going
All
to
right.
the
You
doctor,
guys stay cool out there.
and Johnny is going to take me to the doctor, and he's going to
Yeah.
say, as long as I stay on my medication, I'll be doing much better these days. Anyway, if you enjoy the Handyman Pros Radio Show, please tell your friends and neighbors. Send them the link to this crazy show. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com or handymanprosradioshow@gmail.com. Either way, we'll get a hold of it. And YouTube, we are on YouTube. Yep. We are also out there on Facebook. We have a group called Handyman Pros. And Johnny, speaking of some of this stuff, have you seen some of the ladder posts I put up lately? Anyway, they're doozies. Woohoo!
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I like the interaction. I like the interaction on that. We've got some good folks that post stuff out there. So
yeah. We get some good pictures.
Yeah.
Of both jobs or faux pas, if you want to call it that. So.
Right.
Anyway. All right, folks, with that, we'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.